After 8 weeks of continuous iterative playtesting, the team feel like we have produced a polished gameplay experience.
The team made the decision to focus on iterating the tutorial and main level gameplay, and agreed that to best accomplish this with the team's resources, implementation of the reward schedules designed in the initial development phase should only be started if the team were confident in the polish of the gameplay.
The tutorial underwent numerous iterations, such as from tutor feedback to implement a different player perspective, and to reduce the interactable items to those only immediately essential to each tutorial section. Although playtesting revealed a continuous perspective to be effective and universally understood across the tutorial and main game levels.
The previous tutorial was designed with areas of randomized play in between each section. The intention was for players to become more familiar with all introduced elements before introducing another section. However, playtesting showed this to be confusing for players who failed to interpret the end and start of each section, which negatively impacted their overall understanding.
To move past this misunderstanding, the team iterated further, and by the final sprint found including a tick over the section's corresponding UI sprite was a continuously understood marker for the section end.
The team removed the fire pit mechanic after testing proved it to be redundant. It overcomplicated the steps of firing the cannon and unbalanced the time to complete player actions with the amount of hazards that needed attention.
We updated player animations and item scales when withdrawing items from the hold or using items from the deck. This removed all confusions raised by the testers as to whether they had picked up the item or not.
Playtesters were often confused about whether actions had been completed during periods of intense play. To combat this, the team added large particle systems as visual telegraphing, which proved effective.
We received negative feedback about the seagull mess when water levels were high, as players were stretched between more important tasks but slowed down by the massive seagull mess on deck. To combat this, we removed the mess when water levels had risen, as it's designed to aid with ramping the difficulty during the early stages.
Despite this removal, the team received complaints of slow movement preventing victory. The team chose to remove the slight slowing effect the water had on the player to remove the positive feedback loop. Instead, the buoyancy behaviour was reapplied to the water to create unpredictability with the movement of on-deck items.
To encourage engagement and formulation of strategies between players, the team implemented a mechanic of reopening previously repaired holes should an enemy cannonball land within a proximity. The team noted higher levels of enjoyment and interaction between players to plan ahead.
New players were often surprised by the sudden increase in water level. The team altered the way in which flooding was applied and moved the start position of the floodwater immediately below the hold. This allowed players more time to recognise the consequences of damage earlier.
To keep the pressure on players are only allowed to bail down to a certain level.
Once these gameplay elements had been included, the team continued to iterate and make adjustments to balancing gameplay variables, including player speed, time taken to complete actions, frequency of action spawned, player debuff percentages, bailing amount, and respawn durations. New players were often not confident in interacting with objects in the level. The team iteratively designed a loading screen containing input instructions, which has now seen players more accurately and quickly begin actioning and preparing against hazards.
Players were reporting not understanding or noticing some UI elements within the game. To address this issue, the team worked to pivot the Canon UI towards the camera and increase the scale and vibrancy of the player UI, creating a consistent UI across all task completions and interruptions. During testing, players were able to remove themselves and items from the ship. To counteract this behaviour, the team implemented restrictions around the bounding edge of the ship. This stopped players being able to overboard themselves and rebounded items towards the ship's centre.
Players often misunderstood the previous player selection screen, thinking a maximum of 2 players could play. While more than 2 players is not appropriately implemented, the screen layout has been updated to allow for all potential player spots to be simultaneously shown so players are aware of options.
While the team were unable to implement all of the updated assets, we were able to optimize existing visual and code elements so that the game ran more efficiently.
If development time was extended, the highest priority would be to further develop the tutorial. While over iterations, we improved how to teach players each mechanic, feedback indicates we were not able to make the tutorial as enjoyable as the main game. While ultimately pleased with the final version, the team struggled with the design of the tutorial throughout the project, with testers often appearing unenthused. Our best design ideas for a two-player experience still often left one player out of the action, while the other was responsible for completing a tutorial step. Given more time, we would have focused on the tutorial, utilising our new designer's skill set to incorporate more design theory. However, since joining so late in development, there were time restrictions and we had to work within the limitations set in place. The current collision-based detection of interactions sometimes proves inconsistent. When the team learnt of a better method using layer-based collision detection, we agreed it was too late to re-implement all of the existing functionality with the remaining time, that if the deadline was extended, we would ensure this logic is replaced.
To increase player motivation, with more time the team would have included the reward schedules designed in the early stage of development, which we chose to omit from the final product in favour of iterating the gameplay and tutorial as much as possible. These rewards would allow players to unlock cosmetic options for their characters, further investing them in the game. With the team dynamic altered in the late stages of the project, if we had more time we would implement more efficient models and animations for all player interactions to better telegraph action completions.